Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Asian Hustle Network podcast. Today we have Suneel Garg, who is the principal of Stella Financial and Insurance Services based in Los Angeles, California. He has over 16 years of financial planning experience with a focus on wealth accumulation and tax Northwestern Mutual, and he regularly speaks at events and training for newer advisors. He is always trying to think of what is next for the industry, his business, and ultimately his clients' long-term financial success. Born in Southern California, has a BS from the MBA from the Darton School of the University of Virginia. So Neil, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I am excited as well. I'm excited to learn a lot about you and hear more about your experience. So let's hop into the first question. How did you get into this career into the financial industry?
You know, it's interesting. If you go around the world, you go over time, you sort of realize that life isn't just a linear line. You don't start one way when you're in high school and you end up hey, that's where I'm going to be when I'm 100 years old. It's definitely a road that zigs and zags. So my parents moved here in the 60s. They just wanted my brother and I to graduate college with a degree where you could get a job. Not like we had to go. This is in the 90s. This is where you had to go back to school and do another degree. This was kind of like go to a college, come out with something. So we both came out with accounting degrees. So I was an accountant for a bunch of years. And in that world, I grew up with my dad doing people's income taxes on the side at our kitchen table when I was little. He was an engineer by trade, so brought him to this country, but he was doing people's income taxes. And I was like, okay. I kind of listened and gleaned in a few things more than I guess I realized I was learning. Then I went to be an accountant. And then I'm like, okay, these are all number related jobs. I was pretty good at math. Maybe it's the Asian in me. Maybe it's just I haven't been hammered it over my head when I was little. So I'm like, what job could I do that has math? And as I was an accountant, that wasn't accounting. Now, if there's anything wrong with it, it just wasn't my cup of tea. So after business school, I went to business school. I came back and I was the CFO of a company. And that was exciting. That was fun. It was fun to do it. It was kind of like the way to embrace some change and try something different. But I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I always wanted to own my own thing. And so I was like, what do I know? What do I know well? I know income taxes pretty well. I'm one of a very few number of people might ever meet that actually enjoys talking about income taxes. I don't like paying them, but I like understanding how not to pay them. I like the stock market. And that sort of led me to start building this firm that I have, Stella Oak, within Northwestern Mutual. It just kind of became the evolution of, hey, how can I be an entrepreneur? How can I get paid for my hard work if I want to build something? And what's the specialty within finance that I'm probably different at than other people?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you mentioning that you are passionate about what you do, and that's so important, right? Yeah. And I'm happy that you're able to find your own path within Northwestern Mutual and build something that you can call your own. Out of curiosity, I know this is not a part of the script at all, but what was your experience being a CFO like? I'm kind of curious.
It was interesting. So it wasn't a huge company when I got there. It was 25 people, and it was a trucking company. So it was hauling the big tanker trucks you see on the freeways if you drive around, but not the gasoline guys. It's the ones that are holding all the raw chemicals. And so when I got there, it was sort of hey, do you want to run this thing for me? The owner kind of didn't want to be there anymore. And I'm like, yeah, I just graduated with an MBA. I'm like, that's exactly what I want to do. And honestly, I thought I was going to take over that company. We grew it from 20 some people and $2 million to 50 some people. Again, most of them being truck drivers, to almost $15 million of revenue in 6 years because we helped them buy another company. So the experience was, how do you tighten up the budget? How do you get people paid faster? So they want to, the drivers, if you think about it, truck driving is just a commodity. There's a lot of companies that need people to drive a truck, and there's only a certain number of people who want to drive trucks for a living. So how do you incent them to want to come work for you? You pay them faster, quite frankly. You pay them better and you pay them faster. And then how do you grow it? We actually bought one. I helped orchestrate a way to buy our competitor who was bigger than us, who wanted to retire. And we made the guy that we bought. So using some financial reverse engineering, the company that we bought paid us to buy him, if that makes any sense. We didn't the owner didn't front any cash out and got all the revenue for it by taking on, by giving them some lifeline to stick around versus having to shut their doors. So it was a fun experience because I get to see things come to fruition financially, be hey, let's try this or spend money here. And you could see the results of it, hitting hopefully the top line and then the bottom line on the balance sheet on the income statement.
Yeah. Let's take a step back real quick. Let's hear more about this trucking company. Where was it at? How'd you find this trucking company? Was it through networking that you got hired for this role? Did you apply it Indeed? How do you get to the CFO role?
Fair enough. It's not every day that you meet someone that, like, I used to tell people that I was a truck driver for a living. So I'm like, it's fine, like whatever. My wife, was my girlfriend at the time, would be like, you're not a truck driver. I'm like, it doesn't matter. Like, people don't need to know what I do for a living, right? I don't care. But it's the hustle of like being smart and being like having a vision and willing to take a chance on something. So I found the company after business school through networking. I grew in 2001, May of 2001. And then in September of 2001 is when 9/11 happened. So I was on the East Coast. 9/11 happened. I came back to the West Coast where I was from originally, Southern California. And mainly because the world just shut down and there was really nowhere to kind of be. So I kind of moved home with my parents, and the good Asian mom wanted me back home anyway. I'm like, okay, I'll go home. And I was like, okay, I got to figure out where I'm going to be next. And I just started networking, and the owner of the company happened to be a grad of one of the schools I had gone to. And I just presented a business case to him saying, hey, I think I can help you build something bigger than yourself. And you don't want to do this as much anymore. He was, 20 years, 30 years older than me at the time, wanted to stay in the game and own his company, but not necessarily grow it and run it. I'm like, but I want to grow and run it. And I'll come in and kind of get my feet dirty. And if I can make this thing work, let's have a deal that if this thing grows, then I'll get paid more. And if it holds stagnant, you pay me just a little bit to manage your time. And he's like, okay. So I sort of kind of came in and negotiated a deal. Sometimes it's right time, right opportunity. But it's finding someone that I wanted to find an entrepreneur that wanted to like kind of let me behind the scenes to see what it was like. So I could figure out if I really wanted to own something myself and be the man in charge at one point in the future.
Yeah, that sounds like quite the experience. Well, if you want to end up working for one of my friends or myself, we're welcome to join. Do it again. I'm just kidding.
Exactly. You never know where you got to start somewhere, right? You got to start somewhere, kind of get your eyes wide open, and figure out, hey, what's the every good business, I think, has come from another business. It's just an iteration of it, or somebody comes into a business and just accelerates, adds fuel to the fire of the existing, and helps grow the current one. That's a great role too. Like, that's fun. I think the people who really want to kind of have some grit and want to like prove their mettle kind of thing can do it.
Yeah, I think one more thing you brought up that was relatively interesting is that you bought a company that's bigger than yours, right? And that's what I love about finance and entrepreneurship so much, is that there's a lot of creativity at play. Right? There's so many ways to structure deals. Doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have all the money. What you have to come down to is agreement, right? If this is fair, and with things is fair, then you can execute pretty much any sort of agreement as long as it's written on a contract.
Exactly right. Yeah, I'll tell you a life lesson. Speaking of that, two things. Speaking of that, my life lesson that I got, that's a good one, is having it written down. Is in the same trucking company. The reason I'm not there anymore, and I've been doing this for now 16 and a half years. The reason I left is I didn't have anything written down. It was all a handshake agreement with an owner, and it worked. The math proved out, and it was growing, and it was growing fast. And then it just all of a sudden didn't work. It didn't work because one of us, I don't think it was me, decided that we didn't want to pay the other one what was fair share. And it was always a handshake agreement. I never thought I needed to write it down. Lesson learned, right? So I took the high road and I decided to move on. And then you realize that that's just what it is. You got to learn to, like, if you're going to try to do something extraordinary, just kind of have some protection on the back end of it. That's the idea of it.
I'm sorry to hear about that.
It's all right. It's trust me, everybody's better off for it. He's better off for it. I'm way better off for it. And the life lessons you learn on there is like how not to do it again, but also like sometimes you just got to try things like that. That's part of, like, I think why I'm at where I'm at. And what I love about like being an entrepreneur is you've got to try things. They don't all work. I wish I could say I'm batting 1,000 on every idea we've ever tried. It's not that. What I'm good at is trying things. And if it doesn't work in 90 days, quickly undoing it and trying the next thing. I'm not committed all the time. I can be like in, and then I can quickly be out if it's not working, and then move to the next thing to help figure out what's the accelerant that we want to have on our business.
No, I love that. And speaking about entrepreneurship, how did you end up building an entrepreneur role when inside Northwestern Mutual? How does that even work?
That's a great question. Truth be told, I didn't know a ton about what I do now for a living when I started interviewing for it. It was more networking. It was through an undergrad like mentoring group that I was a part of for some undergrads at my school that I'd been at. And one day I just happened to meet the right person at the right time and just started talking about what they do for a living. And I remember being like, I don't like that job. It doesn't sound that exciting. But the person convinced me to come in and talk to someone because they commented that they know a lot of people and maybe there'll be another role for me. I kind of fell for the sales pitch of like come in and just interview, but it doesn't, you're not committing to anything.
Yeah.
It took me 9 months to decide to make a change. Granted, I didn't just decide like full in because I wanted to make sure I was eyes wide open in what it was. But what I realized is that doing what I do in terms of financial planning is there's lots of different ways you can do it. I could want to sell insurance. I could want to just manage people's money. I could do tax planning, or I could decide I want to do a little bit of all of it, but be more purpose driven. And I think as I realized that, I got to create a firm within a bigger firm that is unique, and I get to do what's purposeful and meaningful for me and our team. Like we're excited about what we do, which is different than our peers, but we all get to the same end game effectively. We just I think we come at it a little bit of a different perspective.
No, that's so fascinating. I'm still trying to like put my head around this and try to understand how it works.
Well, it works in that you come in, they give you a platform. Like they say, like, here's what you should kind of do. Here's kind of different ways you can get paid. There's like 4 or 5 different ways I can make money.
Okay.
And there's a platform for it. And there you go. And then they throw you to the wolves and they're kind of like, go figure it out. So on day one, you got to start trying to book meetings. Like my business is all about talking to people at any stage of their lives and trying to help them understand what it's going to look like if they're 30, what they're going to look like when they're 50, what they're going to look like when they're 70. When they're 70, what does it look like when you're 90 or 95 and maybe one day you pass away with a bunch of money, then you have an estate tax problem. So like, how do you like kind of get out of your own way a little bit about saving money and building wealth? And like in this, like my parents, I think did a good job of saving money when they moved to this country because they never wanted to move home back to India when they came here in the 60s. They did well enough. Brother and I went to college. They paid for college, went to grad school. They were able to retire. My dad worked for the government for a bunch of years. My mom has his pension. She has some extra money. But were they wealthy? No. Could they have been wealthier had they made some smarter tax decisions earlier in life? Probably. They just didn't know what they didn't know. And granted, I don't think they were in the generation to be able to think about it. I think they were head down, trying not to like what they did, which was move halfway around the world to the US. But they've opened this door for me and my generation, and then my kids who are little, that generation to be like, wait a minute, we can build real wealth here. Like they built a legacy. Now, how do we make the legacy bigger? Sometimes it's impact to what you do and what you leave behind in your community, podcasts that you're doing that they'll live forever. And sometimes it's just money, right? Sometimes money can make a legacy bigger as well. So with the entrepreneurship part, I'm kind of going off a tangent, is they kind of sort of throw you out there and they're like, well, go figure out who you want to talk to. Figure out what's your niche. Like, what do you like talking about? And so I figured out that I like talking to business owners and entrepreneurs about, hey, what are you thinking about? Like, how do you double down on your business, but also how do you take some chips off the table? He's like a gambling reference. You can't double down on everything forever. It eventually will backfire unless you hit the right thing at the right time and you get lucky. Even then, and then there's always going to be income taxes. So if you can take a couple chips off the table, hey, what does that look like? What does life look like? And what are goals you want to have? And then it's just, I think over time, it's just the hustling of talking to more and more people is how I built what I built.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, you're able to leverage their platform, build something for yourself, understand how money works, understand how wealth creation works. And the part where you spoke about your parents kind of speaks to my parents as well and my soul. It's sometimes like, knowing what I know about money, whenever I see my parents' finances or whatever, I'm like, they could have built so much more wealth.
Yeah.
Had they known like better. And
it's only small tweaks. Like wealth is simply, I think, the difference between not paying as much in costs. Like I remember one of my dad's friends, and I use air quotes in friends in the 70s. I'm an old guy, so in the 70s, was a stockbroker. And he used to call in the morning on the phone, kind of like in the movies, and would have a tip of the day, and my dad would say yes or no. But that guy was calling and dialing for dollars is the expression, and he was calling with a tip to try to make a sale. Was it the best idea? Was that guy, I don't know, who did it benefit? My dad or my family or that stockbroker and his balance sheet? Probably the stockbroker and my parents, but unfortunately in that order. I think the world has changed to say like, hey, wait a minute. Wealth is simply a small shift in what you're doing already, compounded by time. So the earlier you start saving, the time value of money compounds on itself. But if you can pay a little bit less in fees and you can pay a lot less in income taxes, that's how you build wealth. And the taxes is the big thing that most people have forgotten because nobody talks about it unless you meet hopefully people like us that like my job is to talk about it. To make people don't like talking about income taxes, but if we talk about not paying them, all of a sudden people's interests go up, right? That's the idea.
Yeah. You're absolutely right with that, right? Anything that's overly complicated or confusing, people tend to be overwhelmed. But there's so much to the tax law, so much things that you can do. It just comes down to talking to people like yourself, getting educated. Even watching like a basic YouTube video will like help out a lot.
It will.
In terms of, just those fees compound over time. I agree, and those savings can be used for other investments, and those investments will compound towards greater wealth.
Exactly right. Yep. And it's just about understanding what you don't know. I think like videos are out there are great. I wouldn't necessarily take a lot of them at face value. I would talk to someone personally, but they give you good questions to ask. Right? It's always like when we ask people, we go through our stuff. We're always like, "What questions do you have for us?" Like, I don't have any. I'm like, "Yes, you do." Like, you always there has to be something you're thinking. So we have like a list of questions. We'll ask our clients. We'll tell our clients, like, "Hey, do you want to know what questions we hear mostly?" And like sometimes the question is, "How do I get paid?" Or "How do we do this?" And "Why is this good?" And then you can hear someone be like, okay, they're hearing me where I'm at. And it's not like just trying to push something. I work hard not to be like that stockbroker that I remember calling my parents every morning, trying to push something at them. This is more about, hey, here's the way it works. Here's the way the tax law in this country works. Here's what you're probably going to think about in different periods of time. Like, if I'm 30 now and I want to save money and I want to build something, fantastic. But what about when I'm 40 and 50? I'm still going to want to build something. Can I take a couple dollars off the top now and have them accessible then and then spend the rest? That's how we try to help people think about things.
Yeah. And out of curiosity, regarding your views on money versus your parents, how did they differ and how were they similar? And how did you guys clash and resolve issues together?
It's a good one. I think from a similarity standpoint, we're as Indians, at least I'm a product. You're a product of your parents generally, not always. You're either a product of your parents' behavior or you're the exact opposite. I am a product of my dad's behavior. Is I like having money in the bank. Like that's just a fact. Like I like it. I like that it earns interest. I don't want it to sit and make nothing. But I like having something that I know is there that's mine because it's my hard work. And I don't do anything with it, but I like knowing it's there. But I also like knowing that I have other things that are growing and that they're being smart. My dad did a lot of good tax planning while he was alive for my parents, for him and my mom. Could he have done more? He could have, knowing what I know now. But he did a lot of good things with the amount of money. He didn't make a ton of money working for the government, but he made enough to survive. He could have done some more smart things, but he did really good things about like trying to figure out how to build wealth from whatever he had. The things we differ on is I think my dad, who did people's income taxes for years, sort of as he got older, and I think that's just a function of age. I don't think it's anything else other than that, kind of forgot like how to be tax smart as he got older. But I think a lot of that, it's like owning real estate is a good example. So like if you own a home, you get an interest deduction on your house. Well, as he got older and older and more into retirement, he finally just he paid off owning the house. Interest rate was low and he paid off the house because he didn't want the bill anymore. From a logical, emotional perspective, he did the right thing. He lowered his bills to basically nil. Life was good. He owned his home. Like perfect Asian mentality. He has something he could leave behind, and he always could sell if he ever needed to. They don't need to. The reality was, though, from a tax perspective, he should have kept the interest on the loan and just paid it off slowly but surely. And a mortgage is not a bad thing. So as he got older, he took logic and trumped it with emotion, which I think we're all going to do. But like being that I'm still in the logic is more important than emotion phase, we started to clash on that one, not in a bad way. But I would just have to respectfully disagree with them. And I told them, like, are you sure that's what you want? Because it makes more mathematical sense the other way. And at some point, his engineering math brain was like, yeah, I don't care. And I still have I talk about it a lot, but I have a hard time reconciling that yet. And yet in 30 years, I will probably be the same way. And I'm good to accept it in advance, right?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for making that comparison between you and your dad, right? It's definitely very eye-opening. Let's take it one more step further. Let's compare this with the modern generation. How do we compare the patterns of investment and savings and mentality with the Gen X and Gen Zs right now? What are they thinking?
It's a good question. I think there's two things at play. There is a larger, I think as we go further and further generations away from like the immigrants who came to this country, our risk appetites go up. And risk being willing to take risk and start a business, risk being investing in the markets and doubling on things. You could like what's been popular in the last 5 years, like NFTs and crypto and then like all the hello the I'm just thinking of the word the meme stocks from last year and now again from ironically this month. And there's a higher risk appetite for trying new things. But a lot of that is because we're doing it off of our parents or grandparents' generation that built something to allow us for it. That's honestly without our parents realizing it. Maybe they don't like it. Maybe they do. That's why they did what they did, to allow us to have that risk appetite. What I think with the newer generation, what they're not thinking about is income taxes and just taking I'll say it again, taking a couple chips off the table for themselves. There's a phrase I coined a while back, right? I didn't coin it, but I use called the entrepreneur's dilemma. The entrepreneur, and I'm one. The entrepreneur's dilemma is, hey, I have some extra money. I'm either going to spend it on something frivolous, and like I've earned the right to do it, or I'm gonna what do I do with it? I'm gonna reinvest it in my business so I can escalate and escalate. It's the multiplier effect. The problem is if I go all in on a business and I'm listening to this, I could be like, hey, my business is the best idea, Suneel. I'm going to keep doing it. Problem is there could be a million people listening to this who all think the same way, but not all million businesses are going to end up on top as $1 billion businesses. It's just statistically impossible. So the dilemma with an entrepreneur is, hey, wait a minute, how do you pay yourself first? And what people think when they hear that, sometimes they're like, well, I'll pay myself first. Oh, I pay myself a paycheck. So I take money out. I can pay my bills. I pay myself first. What I think of when I tell entrepreneurs that, I'm like, hey, excuse me, you want to pay yourself first. Pay yourself first means take a portion. It could be $10. It could be $10 million. It's just a number that you can change the number. Pay yourself first by having all this sweat equity go into something for your future for 10 to 15 years forward. You can be 30. You don't have to be waiting till you're 60 to 70. Wait till you're 45 to 50 to get the money out. Have the business, the sweat equity of being an entrepreneur, pay you now for the future version of you, who's going to probably still be an entrepreneur, who's going to want even more capital to do something in the future, but has more control over it. And if you think about 10 years ago, interest rates were basically at zero. Now interest rates are higher in 2024. Well, if I'm an entrepreneur and I listen to my own advice, all of a sudden I might have a pool of capital that I can go get for maybe close to zero, or call it zero or lower than 8% interest. We have stuff that can come out of 1 or 2% interest rates that you could take out and you could do your deals versus like what's happening in the market. So the generation now, I think the one thing that our parents did not instill maybe as well in us, because they were trying to survive, was pay yourself first, which does mean a paycheck to pay your bills, but let the business and the equity as an entrepreneur pay the next version of you in 10 or 15 years, and then build the tax smart that way. So you have another access to capital. When do you have access to more capital?
No, that I don't know why, but that really speaks to me right now because I'm also an entrepreneur. I'm like,
Yeah.
I do pay myself first. So what are you talking about? And then you're like, pay yours and then create a fund for your future self. I'm like, yeah, I need to do a better job.
Yeah, there's two selves, right? There's two selves. There's our current self, like there's life and there's wherever we live. There's all the fun we want to have with our money. There's reinvesting in our business now.
Yeah.
There is the fact that you're going to be an entrepreneur, right, Brian, for like the rest of your life, hopefully. Well, the next version of you in 10 or 15 years is going to want more capital. Things are going to cost more to do the next business. Pay yourself for that version of you, version 2.0, and then spend the rest. That's the one thing our parents didn't do because they lived in the, hey, let's survive mode potentially. Yeah. Let's build mode, or let's put it all into the mattress mode, which worked for a while, but our parents' generation under the mattress interest was 6, 7, 8%. It's not like that anymore, and it won't be ever again. So how do you get ahead of it?
Yeah, I definitely see that. My parents definitely do stuff the mattress full of full of cash. And
I would imagine most of us on this call, listening to this podcast, probably have parents that did the exact same thing because it's
the safe thing to do.
It's safety. It's guaranteed. You know it's there, and you don't have to worry about it, right? Especially if you're new to this country or you haven't been around a lot, balance sheet isn't that secure. You don't want to lose it. That's for sure.
Yeah. That's true. So the next question I have is, what is the biggest mistake you've seen with Asian American entrepreneurs with the money in particular compared to like other type of entrepreneurs? And by other type, I mean like other races. Sorry, it sounds kind of
No,
weird.
that's okay. That's all right. I don't know. I think Asians in general, all of us, as if you like lump sum us all into one bucket, tend to be smarter with our money over the course of generations. I think I think it's more of an age based thing than it is something else, in my opinion. I think Asians come from a lot more like family based. The ones that I at least know, like most of them, family based environments. We look after our own for the whole time, right? There's no like you're 18 and you get out and you're like on your own, and it's like nice to know you. You know, you're around. I graduated business school at 29, I think it was, and I moved back home because when 9/11 happened. But like, there was no question. My parents were, yeah, come back. Like they loved it, right? When I moved out again, finally, my mom was actually sad about it more than anything. And so it was more like they want you back. I think it's more about like, hey, making risk work the right way, as opposed to other races. I think some other races are better at having had generational wealth, like the Caucasians. Like there's just a lot more generational wealth in their family legacies. So they can do some smarter business decisions with their money. They know how to take some chips off the table. The majority of the people I work with are in our community because of, I think it just resonates better with me, with them, and them with me. And they're nicer, I think. But like, I think Caucasians have a little bit better generational history to say, okay, if I do this, I can have this later on, and not live in the 5 to 10 year mindset, expand it a little bit. And I think that's our opportunity in this network, is in this marketplace, and our network is in the Asian market is, okay, how can we like start to expand it on beyond other generations? We may have 3 or 4 generations that have been in this country, but we probably on average don't have 10. And so like, how do you like build that legacy and cement it, and then leave more behind? Spend what you want to spend, but leave more behind. Whereas I think my parents' generation, which was my parents were immigrants here, was spend what they needed to spend, but leave as much as they could behind. Now I think the model is shifting to, there's ways we can help people plan to spend as much as you want and leave money behind. It's no longer an either or trade-off. And that's just because of the way the tax code is written and some strategies that are out there that will help change the next generation after this for us, and the one after that, et cetera, et cetera.
Wow, that's you actually hit every nail on the spot, right? Definitely, I think you're right. I think I see that, especially for myself, like speaking from my own experience, like saving money, thinking about generational wealth, thinking about all these things is definitely, you bring up really good points. So what is the best financial advice can you give to our audience of entrepreneurs, especially the Asian Hustle Network?
If we're all in the same spot, right? I figure like everything I do is I do. Like, we all do the same thing. But the goal is to talk to as many people as you can, talk about your product or your service, be strategic. If somebody says no, move on to the next thing. We've all heard that. I think the best financial advice I could tell you is what I just said earlier, is pay yourself first, but don't think of it as a paycheck to pay your bills. Yes, you have to pay your bills, but let your business and your equity that you're building, if you take, it doesn't have to be, it can be any number. The number is irrelevant. It's the concept of, can I take a couple chips off the table and do something with it that is tax smart, that's forward looking 10, 15 years. You might even do something that's not that liquid for 10 or 15 years in order to force yourself to save it, and then reinvest the rest and spend the rest. Like, let the hustle pay it. Like, while we have the effort and energy to do the grind and do the hustle, let it do it. If you want to build something extraordinary, you want to start to plan for the next thing. And it's that pay yourself first model. The business can pay yourself first. I think that's what entrepreneurs just need to remember. And then I think change the narrative going forward for themselves, and then generations after them will start to see that as well.
No, I like that a lot. I appreciate that. So what is the greatest success you had since joining Northwestern Mutual?
I think what's interesting about what I do is I work in an industry in financial planning, and I work at a company that's been around a long time, but in an industry that has historically been in this country Caucasian male driven. And that's just the reality of this country. Like, it's fine. Did I know that when I came in? No, I didn't really think anything about it. I just knew that. What did I know? I knew finance, and I knew taxes, and I needed a platform where that would make some sense. And this platform kind of fell in my lap. And I'm like, I'll just give it a try, and I'm going to put my head down and see what happens when a decade later, and I'll wake up. And it was working. My biggest success is that within Northwestern, there is the movement of like, hey, we all want to have advisors and people that we talk to in our normal world. like I trust people that kind of look and act like me. I mean, I just do. It's human nature. And so being able to like bring more people like me in our network and this thing into what we do, thinking about the generational wealth, thinking about 10 years ahead, their own generational wealth of their own selves, paying themselves first. It's been very rewarding, and have had some success within Northwestern within that segment. To be a top 100 advisor at Northwestern is pretty exciting. But it's the impact that we get to make, and I think it's that is what drives me to do what I do, and I think that's the success driven metric is like how many families or businesses can we impact? Because a lot of entrepreneurs have employees. You can have one employee, you can have you can have 500, but at some point, none of us really want to hire people to lay them off. So how do we like increase retention, and how does the business pay itself first? It could also be how does the business think as like an entity for an ongoing concern. Those are the things we like to think about. That's the fun part.
Nice. I like that a lot. So the final question I have for you is, what is next for you? And is there anything that you like to share with the audience?
I think what's next for me is like, I think what I've built, like I like what we've built so far. I think it's working. I think it's we have the capacity to onboard new clients. We're open for business per se. I think we're going to get bigger, faster via merger and acquisition. I can see it happening. It hasn't happened yet, but it might happen very quickly. And when that happens in this space, it will allow for more smart people to be on the bus serving clients. And it's just a way to scale faster. And it's a way to kind of say, wait a minute, could I latch myself onto something else that's bigger than me? Instead of having to be just me forever, it's no different than when an entrepreneur builds a business and then wants to merge or sell for scale. Sometimes it's for finances, sometimes it's for scale. But what if it could be for both, and then keep driving that new bus forward even faster? I see that on the horizon this calendar year, I think, for us. And for me, I think that'll be a big change. And I think the reality of what's something to leave everybody with is when people have probably heard of somebody like me that does what I've done. And generally there's two reactions. Like, oh, I already have it covered. It's like I've got a guy, or my parents have a guy or a girl, right? My parents have somebody, or I don't have enough money to talk to them. And I think those are both misnomers. I think you could have your person could be fantastic, but your person, you should probably want to do an audit or just a second look at it every few years. And maybe there's one or two things that they're not doing tax wise or planning wise that you could do a little bit better for a small tweak, and it helps your overall planning. Makes sense if you can have a free conversation, it makes sense to me to do it. That's how we get a lot of our clients. And the other mentality of like, well, I don't have enough. I'm not successful enough for someone to talk to, I think is the exact opposite wrong mentality. I think it's better to talk to someone who wants to talk to you when you're growing, when you're starting off and growing and you're getting bigger and bigger, because if they're willing to ride the wave with you, how is that a bad problem to have? If you wait till you're a big dog and you're the big dog in the dog show, well, then everybody's going to come at you. It's like hitting the lottery. And the other lottery winner's dilemma is the thing about lottery winners. Their big dilemma is as soon as they win the lottery and their name becomes public, everybody calls them. How do you possibly know who's got your best interest at heart? You don't, because they all sound good, but you don't really understand it. What you want to do is meet someone before you win the lottery, kind of have them show you the vision of what it can look like. And if things work out in your favor and you keep taking chips off the table, then they're there to help you with the rest of it. And you kind of grow with them. So I think don't wait to start a conversation. You don't have to pay for it. You could, if you want, just have a conversation with someone who you think has your best interest at heart and see where it goes. Cause you never know. Maybe it's a good fit. Maybe it's not. Maybe the timing's right, but maybe it's not. But also maybe just become a better consumer of your own needs in the future.
Yeah, really, really good advice. I don't know why I'll start thinking about like the NBA and NFL and how a lot of these guys I'm dating their sweethearts. And I feel like that's a similar concept to financial planning. Somebody grow at you before you.
They just started and they just started in the last like 10 years or so. They've just started because those guys get paid a lot of money quickly and then they blow through it. Right? They're played for 4 or 5 years. They get to their mid 30s and they've blown all their money. They've started financial classes for those folks. Like they start doing them now in college with all these NIL deals. And they're just trying to say like, hey, be smart about your money. You're going to spend some. Like saving money is not the antithesis of saving. Saving money is not the antithesis of spending money. They should go hand in hand. If you're saving the right amount of money and you have money left over every month, which would hopefully be the goal, you should spend it freely and unemotionally and be excited by it because you've done it, you've checked all the other boxes. What we're trying to help people understand, what they're trying to do with these athletes, is realize that savings isn't what's left over after you've spent all your money. It's not like, oh, I've got this left over, I can save it. It's make it a part of your habit, and then you can spend the rest. And then you spend the rest without any guilt. It makes spending way more fun. So they go together.
True.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I like this podcast a lot. So for our listeners, how can we reach out back to you and learn more about you online?
I can give you a website. You want me just to name it?
Your website, your LinkedIn, your social media.
Yeah.
So how can we reach you?
You can look me up on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear from you. We have a website. It's stellaoak.com. So www.stellaoak.com. I'm on Instagram, but that's really just to see me and fun stuff. But you can always look me up there. And I think just like reach out and let's just see if we can have a conversation. You never know.
Perfect. Well, Suneel, it was a great pleasure having you on the show today. And I think I personally learned a lot about financial planning and about how to position my money for the future. So I appreciate being on call today.
Thanks, Brian. I'm glad you did. I hope everyone else did as well. I appreciate you having me.
Of course. Thank you again so much.
Thanks. Bye.